Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Micha and welcome to my Chess Realm YouTube channel. So we're at the Grand Swiss tournament in Kazakhstan, fourth round, very interesting game between Aditya Mittal and Yagiz Kaan Erdoğmuş. Let's see what happened. Aditya Mittal had white pieces and he started with c4, e6, knight to c3, d5, d4, d-pawn captures on c4, and we have queen's gambit accepted, more or less standard moves followed. e4, c5, d5, e-pawn captures on d5, e-pawn recaptures, bishop goes to d6, bishop recaptures pawn on c4, knight goes to e7, and now h3, preventing any unpleasant bishop to g4. So black continues with castling on the king side, knight goes to f3, knight goes to d7, white also castles king side, and now knight to b6, attacking the bishop on c4, but rather than removing it, white plays b3, defending, and black has decided to capture, so knight captures on c4, b-pawn recaptures, knight goes to g6, and knight to e4. Preparing to capture bishop on d6, but black doesn't mind losing bishop pair. Moreover, if black removes bishop from d6, then d6 pawn push would gain a slight edge for white. So black plays bishop to f5, knight captures on d6, queen recaptures on d6, and queen goes to b3, attacking pawn on b7, so b pawn goes to b6. Now white plays a4 and a5, preventing white from advancing a pawn. White continues with rook to e1, rook from f to e8, bishop to e3, h6, and rook to a2, preparing to double the rooks along the e file, but black prevents this with bishop to e4, targeting this knight on f3. In case of capture, white would have double pawns on the f file, not very pleasant. Now bishop to d2 is one of the countermeasures, but white plays knight to d2, so removing the knight, but this is a very risky move. Black continues with knight to h4, so pawn on g2 is twice attacked. Maybe capturing bishop on e4 would be the best option, but now white embarks on even riskier road. Bishop captures pawn on c5. Well, of course, if black recaptures bishop, then white recaptures bishop on e4, and with a pawn up has the edge. So black naturally doesn't do this and goes for a full-scale attack. Queen goes to g6, threatening mate on g2. So we have three pieces are now targeting this g2 square, and white has no other option but to play g3. And now black plays bishop to g2. So here black is attacking rook on e1 and bishop on c5. Yeah, knight on h4 is still at stake, but if g-pawn captures knight on h4, then bishop to f3, discover check, and mate in the next move. So with these two pieces attacked, white plays bishop to e7, trying to grab this knight on h4 with bishop. Knight naturally cannot go somewhere else because it has to protect the bishop. So bishop captures pawn on h3. Black cannot yet capture knight on h4 because rook on e1 is not protected. So king goes to h2, knight goes to g2, rook is under attack, so white has no time to grab this bishop on h3. So first white plays rook goes to e5, still protecting the bishop. f6 was played, again attacking the rook, and now queen captures pawn on b6. Rook of course cannot be captured, or there goes black queen. So black plays knight goes to f4, still protecting the bishop. Knight cannot be captured, or there is mate on g2. And here white has decided to play rook to e4, preparing to capture this knight on f4, the only defender of this bishop on h3. So queen goes to h5, Rook captures on f4, preparing rook to h4 with double attack on the queen and the bishop. So first bishop to g4 was played with check, king goes to g1, and only now black plays rook captures bishop on e7. So material is equal. Okay, white is a pawn up, but black definitely has the edge here. Rook to e1 is the threat, later with queen to h1 with checkmate. So white plays rook to a1, and now rook from a goes to e8, doubling the rooks, again threatening this rook to e1. Well, maybe queen to b1 would be the best option here. Even if black plays rook to e1, then simply queen captures on e1, rook recaptures on e1, rook recaptures. White has two rooks for the queen and two passed pawns, and white would be much better in this position. But in the game, rook to f1 was played. And here black could have simply played rook to e1 and later with bishop to h3 with unstoppable attack. I cannot go through all the variations, but black is definitely better here. But in the game, bishop to h3 was played immediately. And here white could have saved himself by playing rook to h4. After rook to h4, it would be double attack on queen and the bishop. And after queen to f5, the only move still protecting the bishop. Then queen to b1, trying to force the trade of queens. Even if black doesn't go for it, for example, after queen to d7, then rook to c1. White has to pass pawns and attack from black fades away. In the game, white played d6, attacking the rook, so rook goes to e2, rook goes to h4, and now queen to f5. Now both bishop on h3 and knight on d2 are still attacked, and white continues with queen goes to b5, trying to force the trade and also attacking this rook on e8. And black keeps the queen and plays rook goes to e5, attacking the queen, but white still had a good drawing chances here. For example, white could try to trade the queens, but not immediately with queen to b1, because bishop can recapture it. The correct continuation would be, for example, queen to b8 check, king to h7. This is very important that king is on h7. Now queen to b1, rook can capture on d2, but now rook captures on h3. Queen cannot recapture rook because of the pin. And then, for example, rook captures pawn on d6, and material in the position is equal. In the game, however, white plays d7, a fatal blunder. White threatens with promotion, that's true, but black saw further in calculation. Rook captures knight on d2, preventing promotion for the time being. White plays queen to b8 check, king to h7. Now d pawn promotes to queen. Rook from d2 could capture queen on d8, that's true, but it's protected. But now we have, believe it or not, mate in 6. And mate in 6 start with queen captures pawn on f2, check. Well, if king goes to h1, then simply queen to g2 is checkmate. So in the game, rook captures queen on f2 was played, rook to e1 check, king to h2 is the only option, rook captures rook on f2 check, king captures bishop on h3, rook goes to h1 check, king to g4, f5 check, king to h5, and g6 was checkmate. So I hope you like this game, I hope you have learned something from it. If you have any questions, my email is below in the description. Of course, I invite you to visit my Instagram page. That's it for now, and see you soon.